Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schmidt List. I am your host, Kurt Schmidt. I am so excited that you are joining me today. We are going to be talking to my good friend Doug about all things finances because, there seems to be a few things going on in the world these days, with things like stock markets and wars and all sorts of different things. So Doug's here to give us some assurances on things that we need to be thinking about, things that we need to be focused on in over the coming year, and ways that we can sort of stay on top of what we need to be staying on top of, which is our finances and our money. Doug, how are you today?
I'm terrific. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Doug, tell me about the work you do.
So, I am a registered representative of Securities America Incorporated and a financial planner with Securities America Advisors. I own a company called Crest Financial LLC, and we do flat fee financial planning and consulting for businesses and individuals around the country. I'm also supposed to say at this juncture that these opinions today are mine and they're not necessarily those of Securities America. And everything that I share today plus $3 will get you a very small cup of coffee. I
Perfect.
think I'm also supposed to say that Crest Financial and Securities America are not affiliated. So
Right.
that covers that.
That's good. Well, how did you get into the financial services space? What did you trip and fall into it like most of us trip and fall into our careers?
That's actually absolutely it. It was shortly after college. I had graduated double majoring in economics and political science, and my partner, who's now my wife, told me that I couldn't be a ski bum my whole life.
Right.
And I responded to a job posting for a management trainee, which at 21 I didn't realize was sales.
Right. Right. Yes. Manager, trainee. Right. Yeah. Right. Account executive. Yeah, I love the sales names. They're great. Chief
Yeah,
revenue officer.
I mean the marketing department never stops.
No, no, it doesn't. No. Well, that's good. So there's a lot going on in the world today. Like I started out at the beginning of the show. For those business owners that listen to the show, a lot of people, these business owners I've been talking to, have been talking about recession, right? Is the recession coming? Is it already here? How does inflation affect it? All of those things. I just kind of, from what you've been seeing in the small businesses you work with, what's some of the things you're seeing or you're telling people to kind of keep an eye out for when they're a small business owner here? What's the forecast looking like for you?
Yeah, well, I think that there are challenges on a number of fronts globally. We continue to be living with COVID,
Yes.
and we see varied responses around the globe, whether it's the zero tolerance policy in China, which results in massive shutdowns of cities. I believe Apple has lost something like 20 million iPhones that won't be produced because of shutdowns. So that's a constraint. Then you've got the war in Ukraine, which has caused inflation with energy as well as a number of raw materials.
Mm. Yeah.
So that's another source of concern. With COVID, who knows how it's going to play out?
Yeah.
There was an article this morning I saw that the actual case numbers may be 30 times what we think they are just because we're not testing anymore.
Right. Right. Right.
The good news is that it's probably not as damaging as it was before. We have some level of immunity.
Yeah.
But when you look at where we're at and what we've been through, all the people who left the labor market, retired early, we continue to see scarcity, which scarcity creates inflation. That's just basic economic supply and demand. So
Right.
we have scarcity in the labor markets. We're seeing scarcity with respect to raw materials because Russia has such stockpiles of cobalt, nickel, and other things that we need to use to make the gadgets that we rely upon. And so there's going to be challenges there.
Yeah.
And some of those things may be transitory or passing.
Mm.
For example, if we saw some sort of a rapid resolution with respect to the war in Ukraine, we would expect to see some of those prices come down. For businesses, supply chains may continue to be muddled. The shutdown in China has profound implications for a number of manufacturers. And so we may be in this what I call whack-a-mole phase with COVID, and then adding the war in Ukraine just bolsters more challenges. With the threat of inflation, the Federal Reserve has kind of a couple of tools. One is raising interest rates, making the cost of capital more expensive with the idea
Right.
that that's going to slow down the economy. The other strategy that they're employing that maybe didn't get as much attention is they're winding down their balance sheet. So during the Great Recession, there was a whole bunch of quantitative easing, or the Federal Reserve was buying assets to provide some sort of stability to prices and so forth. And as these assets, these bonds and things mature, rather than reinvesting them, they're just retiring the money or
Okay.
shrinking their balance sheet. So that's another way of tightening. And by some estimates, the quantitative uneasing or disease, however you want to categorize it,
Yeah.
may be the equivalent of another 0.5% interest rate increase. So the Fed is trying to get ahead of this. I think they got a little bit behind. But rising interest rates are something that's very tough if you're in a capital intensive business. So
Right.
maybe
Right.
locking into a fixed rate might be a great idea
Yep.
because it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. However, taking that long-term perspective,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going, I don't know, man. But I got in 1998, and it was 8.125%. And mortgages right now are between 4% and 5%. So we're
Right.
still historically low. And I think that creates opportunities for businesses, but it's just a matter of perspective.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Yeah. The one thing that I've noticed, especially in a business like mine, which is a service industry, is that recessions actually have been good for us in the service industry because what I've seen is that, yes, some of these larger, probably more public companies do layoffs and things of that nature. But the problem is that the work doesn't stop. They don't slow down. They just they don't have less projects. They're just understaffed. And what happens is what I've seen is that there is this big belt tightening, and they'll do layoffs, and then all of a sudden somebody realizes like, oh, well, we actually still need to keep making money. So that's where we've seen a lot of opportunity during recession sort of times, where they're hiring outside people because it's a quick way to bring in low risk, right? To bring in people to, so I've been telling people in the service industry, at least in the service spaces that provide professional services, that this is a great time to make sure you're just making people aware that you exist, because that's been really positive. But yeah, if you are in the physical product manufacturing side of things, it's a much bigger challenge, much deeper challenge. Back to your point about it's a global economy when it comes to manufacturing, right? Versus a financial services person, right? If you're building things that go like windmills or things like that, like you've got a lot of challenges to deal with. So speaking of that, is there areas like you said? There is a silver lining to all this. Like you had mentioned that the rates are still historically pretty low. So even though they might go up a titch, it's not going to be what it still doesn't sound like they're ever going to get to where they used to be. What other sort of silver linings are you seeing coming out of what's happening around us right now?
Yeah, so I think that if you step back and you look at prices, so prices are going up. Prices are a signal of opportunity, and so one of the things that I don't think we're there yet, but I think that it's coming. The idea that these higher prices for raw materials are going to drive new technologies, new processes that maybe look at recycling and recapturing materials
Right.
from
Challenges
started out.
drive innovation. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And if you're in the manufacturing sector, the silver lining might be if you're a price maker versus a price taker. Some industries have more discretion on their pricing, and they're going to perform better going forward. So, as an example, materials producers, the cost of copper goes up; they pass that on. And then another good example might be ag, and ag
Yep.
is something I think has so a number of challenges just because of the war in Ukraine. Ukraine feeds so much of Europe as well as Africa.
Yes.
Food scarcity has been in the news more in the last few months than it has in the last 20 years, probably. And so the scale of the challenge, I don't think anybody quite knows what it is, but farmers in Ukraine have guns in their hands, not shovels, picks, plows, or what have you.
Right. That's a big problem. Yeah. No, I love what you said about that innovation part because I mean, in the first 3 months of the pandemic, I saw companies that would take 3 years to push out a new service or product, doing it in months, because they had no other choice. And it was really interesting to me because I kept wondering to myself, like, did all this bureaucracy just disappear? You know, that was holding things back before, where there was so many checks and balances and red flags and redlining going on when it came to pushing the envelope. But yeah, I think people were, I mean, what else could you do, right? You had to push, right? And I think, just like you're saying now, I think that some of these challenges could wind up really benefiting us in a number of ways, seeing, the positives that come out of these sorts of challenges, that, the human condition, right? Like, we'll just survive, right? Come out
Yeah,
fighting even better.
absolutely. Like when Russia cut off gas to Poland, natural gas prices went up in Europe 20% overnight. Globally, they went up 6%. But the cost of hydro, solar, or wave energy, none of those things went up. So,
Right, right.
on a relative basis, I think there are some new technologies that are going to be more attractive.
Yeah, for sure. So let's say if what's your idea? Like, because again, the stock market is such a barometer, as people feel it's a barometer for like the health of things, right? But if you're a small business owner, what's your advice? Should I be watching the stock market? Should I be watching the Fed? What are sort of the key indicators that you look at, Doug, when you're making financial decisions for your business?
Well, I think the first thing is you need to look at your customers.
Yeah.
You don't take your finger off that pulse. That's where you maybe have more ability to push or drive or maneuver. The Fed's
Okay.
going to do what it's going to do, and the market's going to do what the market's going to do. But while on the subject of the market, it's important to recognize that relative to inflation, the stock market's given you the best chance to stay ahead of inflation and maintain and build your purchasing power,
Yeah.
especially over extended periods of time. So if you're an investor, have faith. Maybe look at a little sector rotation. Maybe look at some of the sectors I mentioned that are maybe price makers versus price takers. But as a business owner, I would just say, pay attention to your customer, because there are new opportunities coming in. And how can you harness those opportunities with your customers? Just as an example, you were mentioning the changes in the pandemic. I've transitioned. I'm 100% remote. I work
Yeah.
with clients all over the country that I never would have worked with before.
Right.
And the idea is that I can deliver services. We can be on the same virtual page. There's tons of efficiencies. And so, challenges present new opportunities. And so keep your finger on your customer's pulse and
I
make
think
sure
that's
you
smart.
understand how their needs are evolving and maybe how you can respond. Because
That's
the
smart
Fed's going to
advice.
do what they're going to do.
Yeah, you can't. You watching that stuff. You think you've got control over it. But speaking of control, time I have financial people on, I have to talk about crypto too, and get your thoughts and feelings on it. So obviously that has been very volatile. I mean, it's a volatile thing no matter what. But what's your take on crypto and kind of its future? I'll give you kind of my 2 cents. I'm old and I've seen a lot, so I have a hard time calling it Web 3.0. I think it's more Web 2.5 in my opinion. But I do think that, given NFTs and all these other things, I do feel that there is a real need out there for a decentralized platform for exchanging goods and services. But, is it crypto? Is it the blockchain? Is it these things, or is it the next phase of stuff? I don't know. But since you're a financial person, Doug, I got to get your opinion. I got to hear what you've been seeing.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm going to say I'm not an expert in crypto. I get asked about it. My glib response is it's not tulips in Holland, which, in the 16th century, there was some sort of a financial catastrophe because everybody thought tulips were the bee's knees. And then people are like, well, these are just bulbs.
The tulip standard is what you're saying?
So I don't think it's tulips. If you look at any U.S. dollar bill, the 10, the 50, the 100, whatever, it says backed by the full faith and credit. And, crypto is a faith and credit type of situation.
100%. Yeah.
There's no reserve. And so as long as people are supportive or believing in it, I think there's value there. But as we've seen with the volatility here lately, that sentiment shifts, and it can shift rapidly.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And I think, the thing that excites me is kind of more the Ethereum side of things, where it's this platform for launching some different sorts of services and technologies and things, but I do find, that in some cases where, it is, it's much more difficult in other countries to secure wealth because they're not backed like the US or UK or large powers are, that, these types of things could be a godsend for some of those smaller, more put upon countries in terms of, keeping generational wealth and those sorts of things together. But to your point, it does rely on leaning on the nature of other people and not just policies and laws and things, right? Because there is no laws. Except for China saying you can't mine here anymore. Sorry.
Right. Well, and that's one of the challenges is without a firm set of rules, there is opportunity for Wild West behavior, which isn't always good. But I agree with your point that in the developing world where banks might not have the security that they do, or financial institutions don't have the same regulations or safeguards, that crypto could be a very positive thing. And we're beginning to see that a little bit. But, we
got a ways to go, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
There's some maturity that needs to go along with it. I can imagine, your history in learning economics and how, money came about and how it's changed over, the past few thousand years. Things change. That's just part of what happens. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm not betting the farm anytime soon.
And that's the important thing. Don't ever put all your eggs in one basket.
That's
crypto
the great segue.
Crypto is not the solution.
Yeah, great. And that's a great segue, because the thing that I think I saw happen with the .com bubble and then the 2008 bubble was the people that got hurt the most were people that were not diversified, were not investing in other things. So let's say I'm a person watching this. I have a job, 9 to 5, 40 hours a week. I own a home. I'm paying the mortgage on it. I've got a good credit score. I've got some stocks. I've got a 401k. Am I diversified enough, Doug?
Well, so I think that's a tough question to answer based on, you have stocks and you have 401k, you may have portfolio overlap between the two. And I think that's where working with a professional to kind of parse through your holdings and, identify your goals, identify your time horizon, identify your risk tolerance, and then make sure that we have an appropriate game plan to try to be successful.
Yeah, because that's, like I said, most of the people that I run into, at least, sort of younger professionals, they just kind of follow their dad's or mom's advice, of like, if they offer a stock in the company, buy into the stock and, and then buy some Apple and Amazon and have a 401k, and there you go, right? You're all set. But I do know some more, younger people that, have their side hustles, right? But that side hustle could be an Airbnb. It could be an Etsy store. It could be, a microbrewery. I don't know, something. Are you seeing more and more clients that you're working with where people have additional income other than a 40-hour week thing for that? Are you seeing more of that?
Yeah, I'm seeing a ton of creativity. One of the clients I work with, he bought a number of travel trailers. I live in Oregon, and he'll go set it up at a campground, and he has these mobile Airbnbs, and that's his side hustle between him and his wife. And it's pretty interesting, and they do pretty well. So I think there's a ton of creativity. There's a ton of opportunities in this environment.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, again, it's I think you really got to take a step back and look at the opportunities that that are available for you to go and get versus the ones that you're kind of waiting for you to land in your lap. I think, I would say I probably made that mistake early on in my career was, working for a larger organization. When you work for a large organization, you're kind of expecting them to take care of certain things for you, provide certain things for you, right? Like this 401k, it's a good 401k. Well, is it? I don't know. I mean, you gave it to me. You said it's the 401k that you use. So I'm putting trust and I'm releasing some of my accountability to the organization to cover those things for me. And to your point, Doug, that's where, when I started engaging in a professional outside help for my finances and for our business's finances, like you said, there's some real opportunity that you miss when this isn't what you do day in and day out,
Yeah, and having an experienced professional helps. And so, if you back up, if you're going to work with a professional, I think first you've got to really clarify what your goals are. Work with your professional to establish a baseline, so you can say we are here today.
Well, can we talk about that for a second, Doug? What's like a realistic goal? Like, do you have people show up and say, "I'd like to retire in a year," or, just outlandish stuff? Like, when you say goals? Give me some sort of frame of reference for that. What are appropriate goals for me to be thinking about and setting?
Well, it really depends.
Is it just retirement? No,
I help people. See, the great thing is because I don't sell products. I sell time. So right. I get paid to solve problems, which is fantastic. I'm working with an older client. She has stage 4 cancer. And we are looking to make some gifts that are going to be meaningful while she can see people enjoy that.
Great.
And so that's a very tangible, very immediate goal. I'm working with another client. We are working to accumulate money to acquire some rental properties. And so it just depends. If somebody came to me and said, I want to retire next year, well, they better have some money in the bank or they better have amazing free cash flow because I'll be the honest guy. And nobody likes the honest guy, So, I get paid to tell people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear.
That's good. Yeah, I think that was one of the things that, at least when I'm, again, I have a 23-year-old daughter, and I talk to her like, "What are your goals?" She's like, "I don't know." I don't know.
I think putting on paper and realize that things change. So maybe I
want to retire right
at X date. 20 years from now or whatever. And then you're like, I love doing what I'm doing. And, in the almost 30 years that I've done this, the meaning of retirement has shifted. In the 90s, it was more of a complete exodus from work. I'm done, Johnny paycheck, take this job and shove it.
Right. I'm traveling, I'm living on a cruise ship for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. And today it's more of a gradual phase out. Maybe people pick up a side hustle or they go from full time to a job share situation.
Sure.
And I think that, people are recognizing that A, the paycheck is nice, B, socializing is nice, and so, with us living longer, that whole definition of retirement has been more fluid in the last decade plus than it was originally when I started.
Yeah, I think that's super smart. Well, Doug, I want to thank you so much. I always enjoy our conversations and I learned so much. So I appreciate you taking time. If I want to know more about Doug and the services you provide, where should I go? How do I get in touch with you? How do I learn more?
Yeah, you can call me at 541-868-0449 or send an email to doug@crestfinancialllc.com.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that when the show is published, we'll have that all in the show notes so people can find you and contact you. Thanks so much, Doug. I appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. This is great. Hope we can do this again.
Oh, yes. We will do it again because the world of finance is always changing.
It's fluid or liquid.
I see what you did there.